Well, hello, and welcome back to another podcast episode with Brittney Bundles. You are listening to the Brittney Bundles podcast, where we empower people through entrepreneurship. And today, what I'd like to talk about is the importance of protecting our mind. The importance of protecting our mind. This topic came to me, I think, a little bit towards the beginning of last week. And I wanted to create this because so many of our actions, so many of our life choices stems from what we think, what we allow in our mind, what we're constantly thinking about, what we are thinking that we can do or thinking that we can't do. And so our mind is very powerful. I talk a lot on this platform about the importance of making sure that we're speaking truth to ourselves and making sure that we're being very cautious about what we allow to come out of our mouths, what we allow to go into our ears, and what we entertain ultimately. And so protecting our mind goes hand in hand with those topics. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. If you are interested in this podcast, I encourage you to share it. Sharing the podcast not only helps this podcast grow, but it also helps to share the word about other entrepreneurs and businesses that have been featured right here on this podcast. If you are interested in being a guest on the Brittney Bundles podcast, I'd love to have you on. Please be sure to send me an email to the letter B, Talks, Talks, @yahoo.com. I'm going to go ahead and give you a brief moment to share the episode, and then we're going to dive right in. I do want to welcome you all back to another podcast episode with Brittney Bundles. We're going to get started in just a moment. All right. So I do want to welcome everyone back to another podcast episode with Brittney Bundles. I want to reiterate how important it is to protect our minds. And let's just, kind of zone in on this just for a little bit before I get into my first point. As an entrepreneur, there are going to be a lot of things that we come across, different ideas, different opinions, different thoughts. We may have feelings that are associated with thoughts that originally stemmed from maybe lies that we were told or lies that we fed ourselves, or some of the things that we feel may even come from truths that we're wanting to change about ourselves or our circumstances. And ultimately, it's very important to make sure that our mind is in a position that can actually help us continue to thrive. And in order to do that, we have to be very intentional on what we feed our minds. And I know it may sound, okay, this is simple, Brittney, we want to make sure that we're protecting what we think about, what goes into our mind, what we're entertaining. Okay, of course. And although it may sound like a simple concept, it is something that is very challenging for a lot of us to grasp. Even watching TV, there are certain things that I watch on TV that will have me feeling a certain way, have me thinking certain things. And so although you can distinguish, for the most part, a lot of people can do this, what's right, what's wrong, what they agree with, what they don't agree with. Sometimes our subconscious mind still holds on to some of the information that we allow into it, whether it be via our eyes watching something, whether it be via our ears listening to something, whether it be via just our hearts, us thinking something or feeling something, and then we're allowing that to continue to overplay in our minds. This is very important for me. I ask God to protect my thoughts. It's very, very important that I have God involved in what I am thinking, because a lot of powerful things come from a thought. My business, for an example, my whole business started from me thinking about it, the name, the idea, what I was going to do, how I wanted my life to be, goals that I have or that I even had, that I've accomplished, and goals that I'm still working towards, started as a thought. Some of the doubts that I've had started from thoughts. And so we want to make sure that we're very cautious, like I mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, of what we're allowing our minds to think. Also, reading different materials. There have been times that I have caught myself reading different things, and the more I read certain things, the more I said, okay, I need to be a little bit more cautious about moving forward. And it's not that I can't distinguish between what's right and what's wrong, or I can't make my own choices as to, what I'm going to act on and what I'm not. But it's the simple fact that I have to protect all parts of my mind, even the subconscious part of my mind. And there are certain things that I don't want to get in. There are certain things that don't need to get in. There are certain things that are going to be distractions, that are going to get me off of the path that God had intended for me, or God has intended for me. There are certain entertainment activities that are occupying so many people's minds, that are distracting them and prohibiting them from becoming the best that they can truly be. And so when people talk about limiting distractions, it also comes with empowering your mind and protecting your thoughts, protecting what you allow in, protecting what you entertain. Like I mentioned before, the first point that I want to go over is be mindful and cautious of what you allow in. In other words, be cautious, be intentional on what you entertain. Now, I'm like, very, very, let's say, I'm not someone that's very interested in watching TV, but I am someone that if I find a show or a series that I like, I will find myself getting caught up binge watching it. I can say I'm guilty of that. And although there's no real crime in it, there are some things that I find myself watching that I shouldn't watch because it's not really moving my mind in the direction that it needs to move in. For an example, if I'm watching a show all day about zombies, which I love certain shows about zombies, if I look at that in the aspect of being productive, in the aspect of the goals that I have for my life, in the aspect of how much time I have in a day to get done what I need to get done, I have to ask myself, is this productive? Is this something that I'm letting in that is going to empower me? Is this something that is going to encourage me? Is this something that is enriching my knowledge? Is this something that is enriching my spiritual faith? Is this something that is bonding me closer to my family or my friends? Is this something that is strengthening my business? What is the purpose of me doing this? Now, I don't want to get this confused with saying every single thing that you do has to be business oriented, because that's not what I just said. And sometimes when I say things like that, that's what I get. Okay, so you're telling me, Brittney, all I need to do, all I have to do if I want to be a successful entrepreneur is constantly work, and I can't have any fun? I'm not saying that, but there comes a point where we have to look at what's fun in comparison to what's a waste of time, in comparison to what is not productive, in comparison to what is holding us back from obtaining our goals, in comparison to what is bringing us further away from the plan or the path that God has designed for us. We have to look at all of that, because no one gets to success. I don't want to say no one. Let me change that. A lot of people don't get to success by just accident. They don't just happen upon success for the most part. A lot of people don't grow closer to God on accident. A lot of times it's intentional. Most times that I've ever heard of, and even with my personal experience, it's intentional. There are things that I have to intentionally do in order to get my relationship right with God. And I talk a lot about God on this platform because, like I mentioned before, I like to tell the truth. I like to make sure that I'm being completely transparent on this podcast. That was the whole purpose of me getting on YouTube. That was the whole purpose of me creating this podcast. That's the whole purpose of me wanting to get out and actually share my story, is to be truthful and transparent. And so, like I mentioned before, I can't really mention the truth if I'm not including God in that. And so in order for me to explain how I have got to where I'm currently at, I have to mention God. There's just no way that I can just exclude God from my business experience, because there's no way that I can exclude God from my life. I have to make sure that I'm mentioning him, because he had such a big part to play in everything that has occurred in my life. And so be mindful and cautious of what you allow in and what you entertain. There are so many people that complain. I was one of them, about not having enough time in a day. But if you really go back and if you really look at what you did during that day, a lot of times, if you're honest, you'll be shocked to notice how much time you had that went towards something else that was not productive and actually bringing you closer to your goals. Now, some people have more time to waste than others. Some people have more time to play around than others. And that's based on where you're at in your life. And that's also based on what your goals are. Not everyone has a goal to be productive. And that's what we have to be mindful of as well. There are going to be some people that are around you that are not focused on becoming better. There are going to be some people that are around you that already feel like they're the best that they can be. And so all that they do, for the most part, is condemn and look down on others and continue to live their life how they're living it. But there's no progression. There's no advancement. And not saying that you can't advance being around someone like that, but I'm saying we have to be mindful of the conversations we have as well. So someone that is not looking to be productive and you are, the conversation is going to be different coming from them than probably what you need to hear at that time. The actions are going to be different than probably what you want to surround yourself with at that time. That's why it's so important to make sure that you are encompassing like-minded people. And like I said on my previous podcast, I made a whole podcast episode titled How to Find Like-Minded People, because it's really important to do that. I'm not saying you can't find value in people that are not like-minded, because there's tons of value there as well. But there's a lot of value also in finding people that have similarities in lifestyles and also life goals as you. So we have to, again, be mindful and cautious of what we entertain. If you're someone and you are working in integrity and living in integrity, and then you're talking to someone or entertaining someone that does not have those values, that really don't care about living in integrity or doing what's right or even being honest, although it may not sway you to change who you are or your actions, you still have to ask yourself, is this productive? Do I want this kind of conversation in my mind? Do I even want to allow this type of thinking or thoughts to get inside of what I'm trying to do? Because no matter what, like I said, a lot of times you just don't know what's getting stuck in your subconscious mind. That's why when I was a child, one of my family members used to always say, don't go to sleep with the TV on. You don't know what's playing. You don't know what's on. You don't know what your mind is picking up on. So it is very important to protect your mind. The second tip that I want to talk about is staying covered in the name of Jesus. So there are different things that are going to try and, like I mentioned before, knock you off of your path. A lot of times we don't realize that our business is bigger than us. A lot of times God moves through the gifts that he placed in us. Meaning that if we use the gifts that God placed in us to start a business, God can use that business to touch others. God can use your testimony to inspire others. God can use the gifts and the fruits from the gifts that he placed in you to bless others. So your business a lot of times is bigger than you. The gifts that God placed inside of us is bigger than just us. It's not just used or intended to be just used for just our gratification. There's a bigger plan. We serve a big God. And so because of that, naturally, there are going to be different things that come toward us, even as entrepreneurs, that are going to try and distract us and get us knocked off of what God has intended for us, what God wants to do through us, what God has planned for our business. And that looks different for everyone. For some people, it may look like a lot of people coming around and doubting what you're doing. And now, instead of you focusing on the bigger picture and what God put inside of you, you're worried about what everyone else thinks. It could be in the form of you entertaining everything else. And so by the time it's time for you to sit down and work on your business, you're completely drained. Completely drained. There's a lot of different ways that the enemy can sneak in or tries to sneak in to deter you from actually fulfilling what it is God placed you on this earth to do. And a lot of us don't feel fulfilled because we're not doing what it is God called us to do. We're not using the gifts that God put inside of us. We're not being intentional on the people that we allow in our lives. We're not being intentional on what we allow in our minds. We're not being intentional on what we entertain. And we're sitting back and we're wondering and still confused as to why our life is not going in the direction that we hoped it would go in. We're still stuck. We're feeling stagnant. We don't see the progress that we want to see, and we're still confused as to why. The things that we want in life are obtainable. They're achievable, but there are going to be some distractions, and there are going to be some, I guess some would say tests. I kind of like to stay away from that, but there are going to be some choices. Let me say it that way. Choices in life that we have that we're going to have to choose between. And in order to do that, it's best to make sure that our mind is as clear from all unnecessary baggage, drama, distractions that it possibly can be. Now, does that mean that your life's going to be perfect and that you're not going to vent about your life, or you're not going to listen to other people vent about theirs? I mean, no, that doesn't mean that. But it does mean that we have to constantly stay on guard. We have to constantly make sure that we're being intentional on what we're doing. And so for me to do that, I constantly pray for God's protection. Because there are some things that sneak in that we may not even notice is trying to attack our business or trying to attack us. The third tip that I want to talk about is don't allow boredom to knock you off your path. So a lot of times, I remember when I was younger, my grandmother, I believe it was my grandmother, she used to say, idle time is the devil's time. How many people, just nod your head if you're listening to this podcast and you heard an older person in your life say that phrase, idle time is the devil's time. And sometimes, you can actually sit there and think about just that phrase and see exactly what they meant by it. Because being bored, a lot of times in my life, is what caused me to want to get out and do things, entertain things, allow things in my mind, allow things in my life that I really shouldn't have been allowing, because I was bored. I wanted to get out. I got tired of just sitting around. I got tired of just doing the same thing. I wanted to see what else was out there. And although there's nothing wrong with getting tired of something, there's nothing wrong with wanting something else, but there is something that's not productive with making decisions that are not progressive. And so everything that we do, we have to ask ourselves, what is the purpose of me doing this? And how is it going to benefit myself? How is it going to benefit my business? How is it going to bring me closer to the goal that God has for my life? How is it going to make me a better person? How is this going to touch others? How is this going to benefit any circumstance that I'm connected to? How is this going to benefit any circumstance that God's plan? How is this going to benefit anything that God wants me to do? Where's the benefit? Where's the benefit? So instead of letting boredom take over and distract us and deter us from what we actually need to be doing as entrepreneurs, as good citizens, as children of God, as parents, as friends, as daughters, as sons, what do we need to be doing to make sure that we can accomplish what we set out to do? Because I think a lot of times we have the right idea with our business, right? We have a business plan. We know how we're going to sell our products. We know the pricing structure that we're going to use. We know the payment methods and the payment merchants, that we're going to use. We know the advertising methods that we have in plan or in store for this business. We have the marketing down pat. We know how to use different editing apps. We have all of this in plan, in motion. But we don't have a plan of how we're going to stay focused. There are so many people with great ideas that just have not come to fruition because of the lack of focus, the lack of planning, the lack of motivation, and the lack of structure. Structure is so important. I've seen so many people that were so talented, still are talented, that have not been able to reach their goals because of the lack of structure and because of the things that they entertain. I've seen so many people turn their backs on God, turn their backs on what it is they were working towards, tapping into the gifts that God put inside of them, opening a business surrounding the gifts that God put inside of them. But because they talked to someone, or because they read something or listened to something, now they're questioning their whole religion. That'll be another podcast for another day. But I'm saying that it all starts with what, again, we allow in our mind, what we're feeding, what we're entertaining. We have to be cautious of that. We have to be cautious of allowing boredom. We have to be cautious of allowing being idle to distract us from doing what it is we were set here to do. And I'm not just saying that everyone needs to focus on creating a business in order to be in line with what God has in store for you or what God planned for your life. But I am saying that a lot of times there are so many gifts that God put inside of us to reach other people. And a lot of times God can use, and God can use whatever we're doing to help others. He can use whatever gifts he placed inside of us to bless others. So I have seen God work through my business. I have seen God bring other people to me based on my business. Or through my business, I should say. The fourth thing that I want to talk about is new levels, new distractions. New levels, new distractions. So a lot of times when you're doing something positive in life, or when you're trying to do something positive, you'll notice that there's something that comes along that wants to distract you or deter you. Something happens, right? Like something, that's where the saying came from. There's always something that happens. It's always something. Something always is happening. You may notice that everything's going well with your business, and all of a sudden, you may lose one of your close friends. You may notice that everything's going well with your life. You now have the structure that you've been looking for. You now have the balance. You have now have the fulfillment, and all of a sudden, your car goes out. It seems like there's always something, or you may find yourself feeling alone. Like, wow, everything's going great, but I just feel so alone. And then you get out and you try to fix that, and you bring other people in your life really with no plan, just no intention, just bringing people in because you're bored or you're lonely. And now you notice that you don't even feel as excited about your business anymore because you're surrounding yourself with people that have constantly talked down about yourself or constantly talked down about your business. New levels, new distractions. Sometimes you'll find yourself making more money with your business, and it may be something that you're not used to. And now you're like, okay, well, I did enjoy doing my business, but now that I have enough money, the money's coming in. I don't know if I'm really going to work the business like this. I'm just going to go ahead and enjoy the money. Now, of course, a lot of people don't say that, but their actions demonstrate that. You may see that in someone that was very, very focused in the beginning, very, very determined to get their business off the ground. And now that it's doing great, you don't really see them advertising anymore. You don't see them promoting anymore. You don't see them focusing or making any business plans. And although, depending on how the momentum picks up with your business, I'm not saying that you have to continue doing the same exact motions and the same exact actions, but I am saying that there comes a time in some people's lives where their focus was mainly the money. And so now that they have the money, they're not really focused on the production or productivity of the business nor their lives. New levels, new distractions. So you want to make sure that you're being very careful again of what you're entertaining, what you're allowing to capture your attention, what's in your mind, what your focus is, what your goals are, to make sure that they all align up with integrity, with morals, with God's plan for your life. Now, the last thing that I'm going to go over is feeding your mind is essential to growth. Feeding your mind. So a lot of times we waste time, like I mentioned, doing things that really don't feed us, doing things that really don't add any value to our lives, when we could have been using that time to feed our mind, because feeding our mind is essential to growth. But we have to be cautious and intentional on what we feed our minds. What are we allowing in? What are we entertaining? Doing research on your business is something that could be very positive and productive to your overall goal. Reading your word, making sure that you know the truth, because a lot of times we don't tell ourselves the truth simply because we don't know. And in order to know, we need to go to the word. I used to wonder when I was younger, why do people read the Bible all the time? What's the point? And then I realized that, okay, if I'm going to tell myself the truth, if I'm going to combat these lies that I've been told, if I'm going to combat these thoughts that I have that are telling me that I'm not worthy of this, or telling me that I can't do something that I know God said I can do, I need to go back to the word so that I can familiarize myself on what the truth is, who God said I am, who God is, what promises did God make to me. And I have to make sure that I'm constantly feeding my mind with positivity, with truth, with the word, with information that's going to help me grow and progress. I'm not saying that you can't have a time where you're having a down moment or where you're relaxing or when, you just want to just let loose. I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying that even when we're letting loose, a lot of times we're letting loose and we're being too laxed on what we allow to enter our lives. And what we allow to enter our lives has a huge impact on everything that our lives are intertwined with, including our business. And so, like I mentioned before, a lot of times, when people talk about starting a business, I have tons of videos on my YouTube channel at Brittney Bundles. So check it out if you have a moment. But a lot of times what I talk about on that channel, and a lot of times what other people talk about in regards to business, don't dive this deep into thinking, into the planning, into the actual making sure that your mindset is okay, making sure that you understand the truth about yourself, making sure that the foundation and the fundamentals of sales are implanted in you. It's not as simple. A lot of times, if you're truly wanting to be successful, as just getting a website and calling it a day. Being intentional. Making sure that we are understanding the root of why we're doing what we're doing. Making sure that we're constantly remaining cautious and intentional on the actions that we implement in our day-to-day lives are going to have a tremendous impact on the outcome of our business. So I really hope that this podcast episode resonated with someone today. I really hope that it helped. I feel like it did. I hope that it did. Again, if you want to be a guest on the Brittney Bundles podcast, reach out to me. My email address is the letter B, Talks, Talks, @yahoo.com. I do want to encourage you all to follow me on social media. You can follow me on YouTube at Brittney Bundles. That is Brittney, Brittney, Bundles, Bundles. I'm on Facebook, Brittney Bundles, Instagram, Brittney_Bundles, and Twitter, Brittney Bundles. Until next time, I'll talk to you all in the next podcast episode.